Good morning. It's Monday, May 30th, or it's Tuesday, May 30th, sorry. It feels like the start of the week, right? Although it is. May 30th, 2023. Let the record reflect that we have four commissioners here in the conference room. Commissioner French is going to be joining us on Zoom, so we will look forward to him joining us. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Under Sheriff Kevin Ritchie.
All right, good morning. Thanks for having me. So what I have today is an MOU for the Whitworth University camera system, surveillance systems. I'm sure you guys are all aware we're diligently and tirelessly working on the Real-Time Crime Center, trying to get that up and running. One of the real important factors of the Real-Time Crime Center is having access to cameras and video systems all around the entire county, so we can pipe into those and see things in real time. It wouldn't be cost effective for us to put our own cameras up everywhere. We want to use existing cameras wherever possible through private businesses and schools and such. The MOU we have here, it kind of addresses concerns. Obviously, we want to be aware of people's privacy concerns, the students' privacy concerns of that on the campus. And so this MOU gives us access to their security system in emergency situation, and then for training and kind of maintenance purposes. In the emergency situation, if we do access it, if someone here at the sheriff's office deems that there's an emergency, like some sort of real-time crime event going on, we have to notify them within 24 hours of the reason we access the cameras, the length, and the outcome of it. So they will be aware of all those things. For training and for maintenance, we have to notify them in advance and get permission to access them. So it's no cost. We both entities are covering their own costs. So this is just the MOU for you guys to take a look at and sign off on if you think it's appropriate. Are there any questions or?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just so as we talk about the Real-Time Crime Center and stuff, it's the cameras that you're accessing from other groups, just like this, are just on if you feel like there's a crime that's been committed in that area or some other emergency. You're not looking at them 24/7 or
not on a routine basis.
Or any of that.
No, and the recording. I don't know if we even have the capability of recording from other private businesses' surveillance systems. I think that's on them. They record it and we can access it through them. But this is simply if there's an event that happens around Whitworth campus or on Whitworth campus, we can access the cameras to track the suspect's movements or if there's victims that we didn't know before, and we want to see in real time what is going on in that situation while deputies are responding. So that's all this is for. I'm sure we will coordinate some training events with them, and we'll access them during that time. But like I said, we'll have pre-planned permission to do that, and they'll know what's going on, and they'll know which cameras we're accessing, all that kind of stuff. So this is only for live emergency events.
Is this a renewal of an existing agreement?
No, this is brand new for Whitworth. This is brand new.
And I assume we have others like this with other schools in place, correct?
Yeah, and I don't have a list of all the schools, but most of the public schools, we do have MOUs in place where we can access them real time, just like this.
Did you approach Whitworth or Whitworth approach you for this?
I don't know. I think we probably approached them because they wouldn't know that we had this capability unless we let them know. So,
okay.
But I think this has been ongoing for the last year or so. This has been something.
I think in light of everything happening, it would be a good thing for that.
It's real. And we learned we had an active shooter training exercise up at Lead last year. And it was pretty eye-opening to see, what you could see in the cameras in real time, and there's still a little bit of a delay, and so there was some issues with people from the control center issuing orders and then waiting, and they're like, why aren't they doing what I told them? And then they would do it because there's still kind of a delay. So we're working on those kind of issues as well. All right,
Thank you.
awesome, thank you.
Appreciate it. St. George.
Yeah, so Adam's gonna give the briefing for us.
There we go, sorry, hi Adam,
Hello,
sorry.
everybody. No worries. No worries. And then I did just realize we sent you the wrong presentation, so I just emailed you the proper one. All right. So this is in regard to the CDBG CV2 contract. This was money that the county was set to deobligate. Commerce asked us to work with the service provider and see if we can reallocate some money and get it to work. So we went ahead and put together this presentation for your approval. So CDBG CV2 contract was initially awarded to Family Promises Spokane in 2021. This is supposed to be execution of the contract with Spokane County. We did originally get over $400,000 for these services. These services initially were for quarantine and isolation services for our emergency shelters.
We're working on getting that up
No worries.
on the computer, so.
No worries. Just a little background on it too. In October of 2022, quarantine and isolation was no longer deemed a priority. So we were essentially forced to deobligate the money. At the time, we did not see any other services that our service provider would be able to easily switch to from quarantine and isolation to one of the other appropriate or advised services that were still eligible under the COVID programs. So this money has been essentially sitting here since October of 2022. Commerce, again, once we went through the deobligation process, asked us to work to find, and luckily we were able to find some information. We'll be on slide 4. Thank you guys so much. And so here's the information for the program. Family Promises, we will be switching activities. We will now be funding this money. We'll be funding caseworkers who are still working with the families who have been identified during the COVID pandemic, who have been affected. So these are a working list that Family Promise will be working with of people who are still show effects. And what they'll be doing is they'll be doing housing counseling services at a cost of $272,000. They will also be doing housing information and referral services for a cost of $55,000. A total award to be spent between now and June 30th, $379,277. And this switch to these services will also allow them to reach a greater proportion. We originally were earmarked to help about 400 unduplicated beneficiaries. We are now marked to hold 625. With this amendment, we would extend the deadline, as I said earlier, as well to June 30th, so that they can spend out.
So, out of my concern, again, Commerce is getting all these dollars that they suddenly have to spend by the end of June of this year, not next year, this year. So to spend that much money in a month and a half or a month now is gonna be tight. Can they go back to and reclaim costs from the past?
We do have some earmarked bills that once approved again, because we were deobligating the money, so they were basically just looking for coverage for those bills. If allowed to, we would cover an additional $50,000 of already itemized services. And then also Commerce has relinquished their must spend this funding by 80% or 80% by that June 30th deadline. So Commerce is also saying that if we do need time, further extension would be approved. However, they want to know that we're using this money before they would approve an extension. So they said essentially once we do the billing, the draw, once we can prove that, build with them that we're continuing services, they would then say, yes, we can extend these services till the end of the year or until for a 3-month or 6-month period.
And do you have that in email or?
Yeah, very much.
Documented from them?
Yeah, very much documented from the Department of Commerce, from the program rep. He was very much adamant about it because again, our department was like, this money is too difficult for the programs to spend. It's been, isolation is, you only have so much space in our emergency shelters, so you can't itemize or use a lot of the funding up in as quick a time as they wanted. So this will definitely allow for service providing and paid directly to the service provider.
No, because, I mean, we're part of the, helping with getting the funding out for the isolation and quarantine and all of that. And yes, by October, it was over at that point.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out, how, and they definitely helped us with, just so Amber and Chris, they helped us on the family side with our isolation and quarantine versus the individual side. So I'm happy to figure out how to help them, and they understand that these funds go away, that they're not ongoing funds.
Yep, yeah, so this is literally just a project for Family Promise to kind of get into the rural areas where a lot of the COVID identified people who are struggling with COVID have been what they've been able to identify in the regional area with our families. So they're really wanting to just make sure that, again, working through that backlog of people who have already applied for assistance who weren't necessarily initially able to get assistance through that. This will help them with, again, finding job services, helping to find housing, do negotiations for landlords, help with some of those additional little fees that come with application fee, background checks, and all that.
And then, these funds, since they're CDBG funds to the county, have to be spent within Spokane County.
Yes.
That as they're going out to some of the rural communities. Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions, concerns?
So we'll see this agreement then is it tomorrow or today?
Excuse me, next week.
Next week. And that'll be okay to get it all finalized. Okay, sweet.
Come on, Jim. Get it going.
No, well, with all
Only got one
the,
and two.
with everything
What
being,
day is today?
with the emergency stuff, it's like, with commerce right now, it's like, we're not the only, I'm hearing in the community, so there's lots of people that are having the same issue with commerce, that these dollars have to be spent, and I think we're seeing potential clawback from the federal government that everybody's wanting to get them out there and spent from the end of the fiscal year for the state is the end of June, so that's why the deadline for them. So
One thing, Commissioner, to point out is the CDBG CV COVID money has a different timeline than the Treasury money does. So that could be some discrepancy you see there as well. But you are absolutely correct. It is really difficult to find zero with commerce right now with all of their different funding sources. This is one that we have a little more flexibility on than others.
okay. Well, and just because like with the housing dollars that we received, how they clawed some of that back, which we didn't know that they were doing, 6 months ago. Don't want to leave anything for chance out there. So very good. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if you have like Jason and Krista. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Kyle's part of our team too here this
there we
morning.
go. Sorry.
Good morning, board. Thank you for a little bit of time this morning. We're here and excited to provide an update with our Vista Stadium Improvements Program. We've been busy at work preparing and had applied to the Project Review Committee to proceed with the GCCM alternative delivery. And last Thursday was our presentation before the committee and questions and answers, and it was a full hour process. And I'm very pleased to report we did receive unanimous approval from the PRC for our project. And I grabbed a couple slides here. That's one of the strength and conditioning building on the left, updated clubhouse. If we go to the next slide, that's just again a little overview of our project budget. And if we go to the next slide, I have a timeline here. That's a summary of the different components. Next slide, please. And that's, again, representing all the different projects within the campus that we'll be completing. I know it's difficult to read from here, but it provides a really good idea of everything ahead, the different moving parts and pieces and the sequencing, and certain buildings have to be removed. And one of the unique things about the project is there are certain components that can be done during the baseball season while games are being played, and certain components that cannot. And that's all part of the project. And next slide, please. And there is our timeline slide. And I think the last timeline I had before you led up to the more or less the May 25th presentation. So this one picks up shortly after that. And we have been working diligently with the whole team to have the RFQ out on the street, hopefully by end of day today. The advertising is out, and I think as of this morning, we were still 1 or 2 signatures away from having that advertised today. It's for, again, just soliciting the general contractor, construction manager firm right now. And we, over the next couple months, hope to receive several submittals, and we'll go through an evaluation process. And in fact, Kyle and Scott and Chris are all part of that review committee. And I just want to take a minute to thank Kyle for his help, and Chris as well. The presentation went very well. They had a lot of very good questions. And Kyle has a lot of experience with this type of construction, with the committee, and anyhow, was really grateful for his wisdom, and was very, very helpful. And Mr. Duff was really helpful too, talking to the sequencing. Anything you want to add? We're just really excited to be moving forward and to report some success.
Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of work leading up to the presentation last week. Doug did a great job with his team, bringing everybody together. I know we went through a quick process with the owner's rep also, but I think we secured the right owner's rep that really helped us in that process as well. So feel really good about the outcome, unanimous approval. And just talking it through with more and more contractors too, I think this is our only path really in order to get this done in the timeline that we need to get it done. So I'm really excited that this will be the first county GCCM project, and I think it's going to be successful.
We actually had open public testimony from a couple of contractors in support of our application, but also very clearly said, we will not pursue this project if we don't, if it was not.
And I want to throw out a thanks too to our purchasing department and our legal. Again, this is all new, and they've been really fantastic and helping, embracing the guidance that we're receiving from our outside expertise, but they're really helping to make this happen and keep us on our timeline. It is very aggressive, but I believe it's very doable too. And so far, we are right on track. So hopefully Tony might be out there, and want to shout out a thanks to their team too. It really has been a cooperative effort, and we're really excited to continue to be moving forward on our timeline.
Doug has a whole new Rolodex full of terms now, so he's got flashcards, and he's very well versed on this. So Doug's been deep into it.
A lot of new terms, yes.
And just from a process standpoint too, Scott, I know you just got back from vacation, but you'll see an email from Brenda McClarty on Friday. And then Commissioner CUNY, you'll be the next to sign on this so that we can hopefully get this posted to our website today. So just a procedural message on that.
Got it, moving it forward. And commissioners, this is exciting because it's not only the first GCCM, but our second alternative delivery that the county's now moving forward with. Kyle's, the Public Works facility is the second one. So as we're towing into these things, getting really good support from the PRC, Kyle's been an excellent addition to our team with bringing that historical alternative delivery expertise to us. So it gives us a lot of new flexibility in how we approach projects. So great job to the team by getting that unanimous support.
Can we get an update from how the push in the legislature went?
Oh, yes, the 5.8 million in funds were officially approved and signed by the governor on May 16th. So that is a critical element, and so we're right on track there. So many thanks to the legislative efforts there. I think there's been some collaboration as well. So we're really excited to have that fall in place just in the nick of time. And it was very helpful through the presentation and the committee. There were several questions about budget, and it was very helpful to be able to have that in place along with our funding agreement.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
So it looks like, so yes, so you want to advertise today for,
Yes, for the GCCM, and I think it's all queued up, just a couple signatures, and it will be out today, and we will be following our timeline. Steps.
and I know that, you know, with that, having been some contractors, you know, actually testify on behalf, so are they excited about the project and?
Absolutely. They're very happy to see that we are taking this approach and going through and doing it as a GCCM. And we've got the attention of all the big firms in town. So they sound like they're ready to go. We've run this procurement timeline by them. And they have kind of blessed the timeline. It is very aggressive to get moving this quickly, but they understand the why, so that they can hit the ground running. And so, yeah, it's been very well supported, I'd say, by the high quality contractors.
And then Chris, I would just ask, with Major League Baseball, with the Rockies, are they, now that we're at this point, how are they feeling?
I got my first positive phone call from Major League Baseball last week. I was like, do you have the wrong number? What's happening here? Yeah, Freddie Seymour with Major League Baseball, who he's the gentleman who is kind of the conduit, you know, they have an architecture firm that they also look to help with this process as well. He called me with an unbelievably positive tone, really, really complimentary just of the community, of the concept. He's fine in understanding the concept of getting all of these different entities moving in the same direction, from, you know, the owner of the facility to Spokane Valley to now the state funding coming through too. He really was excited to see the support the community has, understands the aggressive timeline, understands also that, you know, we're taking this new and different path because we need to meet that timeline too. So I think it was the first time I sensed in his voice of like, holy crap, you guys are pulling this off. Great job. And you're going to meet this timeline too. So I felt really, really good about that. So in the Rockies, same thing. The Rockies have been up a couple times. The president of the Rockies was actually here 2 or 3 homestands ago. Again, very complimentary of kind of the bones of the facility, the airport. Everybody loves the airport. Getting around town, he was really impressed with as well. The community support, the fan support really stood out to him also. And the Rockies couldn't be happier with the case progress. So I feel really good about the Rockies, feel really good about Major League Baseball and just the progress we're making right now.
Okay, great, because, yeah, stuff doesn't always happen at the speed of light that private business thinks it can happen at.
Yeah,
but I think,
yeah, Major League Baseball's starting to understand.
I think we, you know, it was fast time frame, but, you know, what we needed to get to, you know, meet their deadlines, so.
We've done a lot of work. We've come a long way. There's a lot left to do. The timeline, as Doug alluded to, is aggressive. You know, I think we've laid it out, and as Kyle said too, we've bounced off a few contractors. It's great to see them show up in person too, just supporting. But there's a lot of work left to do, but I feel confident the team we've got in place, we get this thing done.
Any other questions?
One other comment on that was that this was actually the first in-person ARC meeting since end of 2019, early 2020, and the first one ever on the east side.
Here.
Yeah, it was here in town, and it was
That's
just,
convenient.
it was great. So it was a hybrid
5 minutes
meeting.
from the house, yeah,
15
that's
members were remote, and about 15 in attendance local, about half and half. And so we had a mix of in-person presentations. Spokane Public Schools was there presenting as well, and it was really cool. Neither of those things, well, like I said, we hadn't done it in person since pre-COVID. We'd never done it on the east side, so everybody was pretty impressed and very happy to be together again.
That's exciting, yeah.
That facility, that ESD 101 facility is fantastic.
Yeah, Talbot Center.
We've never used that. That's a wonderful, especially if you want to do hybrid, because they have really good tech.
Yeah, no, they've done a really good job up there.
How are you coming on raising the full 22 million?
Sure, great question. So I think with the state allocation that we've got right now, what we see out there. I would say by July 1, we should be in the $16 million range, which is a great step. That's the target for Major League Baseball compliance as well. So the remaining $6 million are some of those fan amenity pieces. And I think we've got a ton of momentum right now to complete the full $12 million raise. So I feel good about where we are.
Well, thank you for coming
Yeah,
in.
yeah, and-
Letting us know, and
You bet. We'll be back before in July, hopefully with a GCCM for you all to approve and consider. Thank you very much.
very good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It is very aggressive.
Get her done, get her done.
Okay, good morning, Tammy and Scott, welcome.
Good morning. Commissioners, thank you.
You're up next, yeah.
We are before you today with the first of our usual three-step process. This is related to the Shoreline Master Program and its periodic update. The Shoreline Master Program, I think we have a few slides for you. And we will keep this brief. This is fairly straightforward at this stage. Thank you. Next slide, please. The Shoreline Master Program is one of the key elements in our comprehensive plan portfolio. It does derive, of course, from statutes and is a requirement of every county. You can see here right from the WAC where the language comes from. And in Spokane County particularly, because of our topography, because of our ecology, the Shoreline Master Program is a particularly important part of what we do. Virtually every building permit that comes through the building side of our shop gets referred out for a critical area review, for example, on anything that's around that in the Shoreline Master Program, and the county's environmental ordinance provide the basis for that. Next slide, please. This is more of the legislative language to form a background of why we are doing these things. And you can see it closes with the clear and urgent demand for a planned, rational, and concerted effort to prevent inherent harm in these areas. So next slide, please. Here's where we're coming today, periodic review of the master program. This was first adopted as part of the Shoreline Master Program update on December in 2012. We're required to do that periodic update. This one was initially done in 2021. We are running it through the evaluation and process, and we're now ready to bring it back before you. Next slide, please. In 21, we went through and did the mechanical analysis parts of this, working with our contractor, SCJ Alliance, and also with Ecology. And that analysis found about 15 items that needed modification. Most were minor in nature. If you have some specific questions on those, Tammy Jones, our planning manager, is with me to address those in detail. Next slide, please. Public process, extensive on this. And the most important thing was this joint local state public comment period. We did this jointly with Ecology on a something like by nation basis. The notices were in all the usual places, and it was a long and drawn out process, but generated these good comments based on those evaluations. Next slide, please. Determination of non-significance was issued for SEPA. Comment period ended with no appeal. Public hearing was held by the Planning Commission in June. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended its action or consideration by the board, and those findings are done and sent. Next slide, please. And then the remaining timeline is, as you can see here, we're here before you today on the briefing. We would expect the board to receive the Planning Commission's recommendations on the 6th and consider them on the 13th. And then the project goes back to Ecology for its final review and blessing, in the sense of issuing the letter that all requirements were met. So sorry in the sense it's a little dry for a presentation, but we're going through the statutory process of how these things come about. And we are happy to answer any questions on that process or substance with Tammy here as well.
So this was moved forward by the Plan Commission on September 30th, 21.
Yes.
So what happened over the last 18 months?
A series of review with some property owners and some consideration of whether to tie in future amendments into this periodic update or whether to separate them. And ultimately, we decided the complicating part of taking them together would have pushed this off another year. And so we decided to break those off and just run this forward because it's a complete document.
So what are those other ideas or concerns? Where are those going to go?
Well, when presuming the commissioners do adopt the periodic update and ecology agrees, we will then go back and entertain those amendments or those proposed amendments, which are very much like proposed comprehensive plan amendments. They come from property owners saying, I want to amend your shoreline master plan to do this thing. So we'll handle those once we have this fully adopted. The discussion with ecology was, should you try to incorporate those amendments in the update, even though the Planning Commission already did this one level of approval, would have to go all the way back through that cycle a second or a third time. And it's like, that would have slowed everything down even more. So we ultimately split those off and said, let's get this approved as a clean document and then consider the amendments in more of a normal cycle. It's not ideal in that sense. And we'll also be looking at this again in the 26 framework to make sure that this 21 and 23 document is going to be consistent with the 26 town plan amendment. And from that point forward, these will go on a parallel track on 10-year renewal.
Do you have a final document that identifies all the changes, the 15 different sections
Yes.
that were changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Should have been in your packet.
Okay. I'm just looking at your briefing, but the packet for today, you mean the decision-making packet for this afternoon?
Wasn't it?
Lori sent that separately to Gina.
Okay. Well, we will check.
I'll make sure you have that.
Yeah.
If you haven't received that
So
already.
basically, bottom line, very few major changes to how we treat permits around shoreline and critical areas. And there may be some things we want to consider in the comp plan update.
Mhm.
So a property owner can basically say, well, I don't want to meet some of these, or I want to amend or change how I meet the shoreline or critical areas ordinance.
Amendments that come through. So first of all, this is just kind of a housekeeping, this
Right,
update.
right.
So there were changes in state law made over the last 8 years. And so now
Okay.
we have to update to make sure the shoreline program is consistent with those changes. But a property owner can come through and request that their shoreline map designation be changed. They can apply for that, and then that would go through its own review process jointly with Department of Ecology, with Fish and Wildlife, and then go before the Planning Commission. So what was going to be attached to these two are two different amendments. One is actually requested by State Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they're asking that docks be permitted in more shoreline designations than there are currently. And so they have some specific areas where they would like to allow for public docks. So there's more public access. So that one isn't as messy. There was a separate one that is has been applied for by a property owner who owns the property where Zephyr Lodge is on Liberty Lake. And that is Dan Spalding, and they're asking for their designation to be changed from natural to rural conservancy. And there are some, DOE has some concerns about that, And then also Liberty Lake Water and Sewer has some concerns because it's the last remaining natural piece of shoreline, on the shoreline of Liberty Lake. So that's going to take a little more review, but they can come through and request these map designations or language changes to the update. Doesn't happen very often. So these two are pretty rare.
So does that require approval by ecology and the county to make a
yes.
change? Okay.
By the county and then ultimately by Department of Ecology. Yes.
And that's certainly been the Zephyr Lodge area out there. There's a lot of discussion that has been happening out there in that area. So.
The PowerPoint says it was determined that 15 sections within the plan were required to be amended, with the majority being minor. Are these the two non-minor? Are there any other?
Well, those aren't included in the update.
Okay.
Those are separate. So those were separated out. The two that were minor housekeeping, I mean, they're still pretty minor, but one of them was to recognize any established floating residences as conforming. I don't know that we actually have any out there, but if we did, that's a new change to the Shoreline Master Program. The other one is to the non-conforming use section. So it expanded it, so it's related, but it expanded that section to extend the period for non-conforming uses. Prior to the update, if a use was abandoned and for more than a year, you couldn't go back to that use. This program extends it beyond that year for someone to go back in and establish that use again. So say if there was an old resort on Williams Lake or one of those lake resorts that are out there, they abandoned it, they haven't used it for over a year. Now, under the update, if it were to be approved, they would have more opportunity to go back in and use those because they wouldn't have expired after 1 year of abandonment. So those were the two that weren't just housekeeping.
More than minor.
More than minor, yeah. Still not major, but more than minor, you're right.
Thank you.
So in the second one, the question I have would be, if it extends more than a year, how long does it extend for though?
I didn't look back through, I believe it gives them 3 years.
Okay.
And I can verify that for you too. I'll double check if I see something.
Okay, it's not, they can't go back historically for like 15 years or 10
No,
years or anything
no,
like that.
there's still a limit on it.
Okay.
It's just beyond the 1 year that was there before.
Okay. Yeah, which makes sense as the economy changes. It's like sometimes you don't just get right back to it, so I can see that. Okay, and so we're doing the plan. I guess I'll ask my questions now. Not having been through the updates before. So we're doing this now, but we're wanting to get it so it's in tandem with the comprehensive plan in the future.
Yes, the legislature has been slowly aligning the various calendars for these major documents that have to be done by cities and counties. And now that the comprehensive plan has moved from an 8 to a 10-year cycle with the 5-year midstream check, they're moving the shoreline master programs to that same cycle to align with that. I don't know if we will do a specific 2026 update of this 23 plan. The fact that there were only a couple of non-minor changes from the 2012 plan probably means this will survive in good form in 26 and simply be incorporated into the comprehensive plan as normal.
And then the homeowners that were wanting to have amendments, you're saying that we're pushing those off until 2026. I guess that's what.
Right now, we just have these two known amendments.
Yeah, and those are different than the comprehensive plan amendments. They don't have to be entertained on a yearly, so if they come in, we will process them that year. Well, like any other amendment to the zoning code or amendment to the CAO. So we'll just take those as they come. So they don't have to be wrapped up into, and wait for the comprehensive plan update.
Okay,
So you would see those separately.
okay, very good.
That makes sense.
I think so. I thought initially I was hearing that we were gonna delay those until the comprehensive plan, or not the comprehensive, the shoreline master plan is finalized. So, but that should be finalized this year. So,
Yes.
depending on the Department of Ecology,
Yes.
so then it's,
And we have every expectation that that's pretty much a ministerial function since they've been deeply involved in this specific update from the very beginning. So they've seen everything in here. We don't anticipate that there will be anything other than a relatively formal approval process.
So it should be pretty quickly. Yeah. It was a joint review.
okay.
Taken care of.
And then last question, so just because like Josh and I have different lakes in our districts that tend to get a lot of questions and comments. How many lakes do we have in Spokane County that this master plan would affect?
That's a good
I
question.
don't know that.
It's a good trivia question.
Yes, it's a wonderful trivia question. I'm trying to
quiz this
remember,
morning.
yes.
I know where you can go find out.
Yeah,
Down in
River Park Square.
And count.
Those are, a couple of those
Yeah,
are
avoid the
private.
Ido, avoid the
Yes,
Ido, and
yes.
Ponderay, and, yeah.
You know what, we will do
Yeah,
a search and
that's
see if
good.
we can put a number on that. Having come from.
Visit Spokane says Spokane County has 14 lakes.
Oh, okay.
That's a Google.
Let's see.
Okay. I don't know.
And then obviously it applies to other bodies of water too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's on the internet, so.
So all shoreline
You're right.
states. So rivers and there are
Rivers,
certain
major
streams that are
streams,
shorelines
yeah.
of the state as well.
That's all. Any other questions?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you,
For the time.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're just staying right on.
Okay, thanks. You got the seat all warmed up for me.
I don't see it on today's agenda, the shoreline, the 2 PM agenda. Do I miss it? Am I missing it?
Believe.
I think you're just doing the briefing and.
Okay. Oh, but they won't, but then we'll get the full document just to take a peek at the changed sections.
Right.
Okay.
Because next week, so they're briefing us, looking at the timeline, and then the planning commission's recommendations will come to us. Planning commission's recommendation, I think is the next week.
Okay.
And then you'll consider it on the 13th, so it'll just be notice for next week.
Got it.
Sheriff's page lists 17 lakes.
Uh-oh.
So-
Oh,
There you go.
Oh, is there a pond in there?
I know.
See?
Because Spokane didn't have a
Big
list of
puddle.
what they were, it just said 14, but as I
Okay.
count them up here on the sheriff's page,
We've got
there's 17.
conflicting information.
Gotta sort this out.
See, things you learn every day, right?
Lake Gate.
Okay, welcome, Mike. How are you guys doing today?
good.
Good.
Have a nice weekend.
Yeah.
Got some time out. So we're back today to talk about the second part of the Law and Justice Center of Spokane County. As we've alluded from the beginning, it's not just about a new facility. It's not about alleviating overcrowding. It's much broader than that, and it really gets to the part today which I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm sure all of you are passionate about, which is the programming and making a difference in that justice-involved life and, moving forward. So next slide. As we discussed, along the way here, there's a front end, and there's a middle, and there's a back end. On the front end, as we'll talk about today, that involves Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council and the programs that they, or the priorities as they see it, moving forward for justice reform. There's a middle component, which just talks about our internal operations and the programming that we're going to be doing within detention services, along with the Community Correction Center. And then there's our involvement on the back end, which is welcoming the community into the Community Correction Center, providing space for them so that they can help provide services to the justice involved and to help them have a better pathway and hopefully cut down on some of the barriers that involve with recidivism. Next slide, please. This is an early slide, and that's why we provided you guys with a copy of it. As you can see across the top, those are all the members that are involved with Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council. And as it was redeveloped through the new resolution from the board, we looked through the blueprint of reform, which is kind of the working, the working body for this council. And so in going through and it's outdated, it was produced several years ago. There was two versions of it. One was the original version of blueprint of reform. And the second was kind of an update to it to provide some more feedback from the judges and so forth that were involved with the study. And so what I asked for them to do is to look and see what their top 3 priorities would be, do the blueprint of reform, but also make recommendations of what they see going forward, but also be one of the recommendations. And so there are some components of this where you'll see overlap, which I'll talk about in just a minute here. And then you also can see that, a lot of them allude to increase in staffing because their staffing levels are down, and they focus on that part of it. And then also there's the reoccurring theme of the Community Correction Center as a sentencing alternative for the judges to use for another tool as well. So I won't go through each one of these, but these are kind of outlined on which ones are available. You go to the next slide, please. From their focus areas and their priorities, we came up with kind of 4 different groups that are going to be focused on it, along with teams that have volunteered already from the SRLJC to start doing this body of work. Focus group 1 is going to investigate and recommend best practices for diversion and justice interventions on the front end. There's a focus group that's going to be inventorying the existing mental health services, developing a strategy and link to all the services together towards an integrated system. And then we're also going to look at the electronic version of it. It was Raintree, and we discovered that not all of the mental health departments can readily share the same information. And so we want to take a dive into that to see if we can come up with a more robust plan for that. Focus group 3 is going to research and develop curriculum and best practices around racial equity and awareness training. Focus group 4 is going to research, develop strategies around the therapeutic courts and the drug and alcohol treatment model. There's a footnote down here. Community Correction Center is kind of a reoccurring theme on the previous page, and that is already part of this program that's going to be handled out of the Law and Justice Office. And it also includes several, conversations or several notes about increasing staffing and retention. And this will be a partnership with Spokane County HR Department and working with Ashley and her team. So I just wanted to call those out. Next slide, please. So any questions about the front end diversion to SRLJC before I dive into the middle component of it? So I'm assuming you guys all have a copy of this, correct? Okay. Any questions about the front end part of it? I knew I'd get at least one, Chris. Okay, here we go.
You're ready though.
Yeah, I'm ready. No, I hope so.
Can you break down who's on SRLJC? Are there any members of the public as part of that group? And if so, how many?
There's 3 members of the public, and they are, and I'll just make sure that I don't skip it here. They are the justice involved as a member of it. There's someone from the Racial Equity Committee, and then there's also city legislative authorities that are involved with it, and then victims advocate. They're also involved with it.
Who's the city legislative authority?
Right now, it is one from the Valley that's involved with it. And that kind of switches hands. They last for 2 years, and then we put it back up. We've also had, like the Spokane municipal law enforcement. We had Delivery Lake Chief that was involved prior. That has since, he stepped down from that, and now Dave Ellis from the Valley is elected to come in and sit on the team as well.
Follow-up question, so these 4 focus groups, basically you've taken the top priorities from SRLJC, put it in 4 buckets, and then those groups are going to be kind of researching, coming up with strategies around those areas. At this point, do we have any sense of how much the different programs might cost within the larger plan?
No. So that's part of their development. They're gonna be seeking those answers for us. And, they're gonna come back with recommendations. What we did do is provide them with a pretty inclusive binder of best practices throughout the country. And so we just picked up as much of that information as we could, included it in a binder for each focus group so they could have a starting point, a jump off point. And then what we're asking them to do is to come back and give us what they feel are the best strategies moving forward. And this process is really about developing a plan that's a strategic plan. Instead of, having individuals, come and talk about their individual wants and needs, it's developing a strategic starting point for all of us. So when we meet with the board, we have these logical points that we're going to be using as part of our strategy. So it isn't so piecemeal. It's more of a strategy developed for the overall justice system as we see it. So, okay, any more questions?
One more.
Okay.
I appreciate the group number 3. I mean, they're all really promising buckets.
Yes.
I think it's they all need a lot of work, right? And I think you're right that we're all committed to those things. I just wanted to ask about focus group 3. It's my understanding that SRLJC previously voted to adopt an equity assessment tool. So that might fit into this. And I'm just wondering if that tool's been used for this project or if you would intend to use it going forward.
It's been utilized 2 times. One is for the supported release program that we had a review. And then the second one was the adoption of the bylaws, for the bylaws of practice. And it is included in this. Sheriff Knezovich had made a point that moving forward, that would be all projects flowing through it would undergo the lens of the racial equity group.
So you intend to use it for this Justice Center program?
All of them, yeah. And I think it's a critical eye. And it's like I said, these are the things that are more passionate to me is the programming part of it and looking at these. So yeah, it would definitely be a part of that. Okay. Anything else? Okay, move on to the middle part. So really what the middle part is about how the shift in paradigm will happen to the detention services operations away from the way it is right now. So one of the things that we have learned along the way is that the way that we set up our system, or originally it was set up, was that it was a charge-based system. And I'll kind of dive into it more on the next slide here. And whereas when they come in, we kind of house them in based on their charges, their security levels, and then we also incorporate an element of classification system, which is a point additive system. But it really doesn't address the individual. And what we want to do is focus on the individual coming through the jail and try to make a difference in the individual's life and put the necessary programming forward, rather than just having canned programs that we throw at everyone. And that the predominant amount of our population is pretrial, so all the programming that they could take place is voluntary. We can't make them take the program, but we are going to ask them to participate if they can. And I got to tell you, before, when we had programs in the existing jail, the population allowed for it, and we had enough adequate space, there were several pretrial folks that wanted their GED while they were in there. They wanted some type of programming. So we just think it's going to be a very positive things that we're going to offer those to them. Next slide. Yes.
So just to refresh my memory, so on pretrial, how long? What's the average length of stay?
Well, our average length of stay overall is 17 days, okay? But it
kind of that
varies, right? And so there's there's that group, a large group that gets out in that 1 to about 7 day range. And that's the folks that go to first appearance and they get out post bond when they first come in. The prosecutor doesn't file charges on them in the 72 hours and they also get out of that part of it. So there's a big, large group that isn't jail long enough to really take part in some meaningful, programming. And instead we have to link them up with the necessary services that goes out. We're targeting like the middle range, and you'll see in these kind of breakdowns as we move forward, the programming depends on how long they're in jail. And so we want to have the right ones that apply to it. The Community Correction Center on the back end of it is a sentencing alternative for the courts. They can use that as, for programming. They can send them to the Community Correction Center to take part in some of the programming. And in the appendix, they also received the appendix, So Commissioner Waldo, if you had asked what is direct supervision at one point, so I kind of put together some talking notes in the back. We're not going to go into it right now. And then we also defined what the Community Correction Center does, so you can see that and kind of read over that if you have more questions on it, okay? So as I had said, our original, our model that we have right now is a charge-based system. It does not process the individual and only relies on the classification process. And then there's no programming that's taking place downtown because of the overcrowded conditions. And only that niche population that gets to go out to Geiger is actually taking part of some of the program. We want to change that. We want to have that, with the space, we want to accommodate that space with more programming for the individuals up on the floors, and then also return the programs back to the downtown facility. Future state, the next slide. We want to enhance our programs, as I just said, with cooperation from our justice partners. That includes, our community and the services they provide. We simply can't replicate all the services and all the programs that are available to the offenders. We want to instead open up and have a space for them to come in and provide those services and help us render those. Go back to the direct supervision model in the jail, and then focus on the individual case management approach. And then everyone will receive a risk needs and assessment from the beginning from a caseworker, so we can understand the individual's challenges and what their barriers are to cause recidivism, whether it's housing, it's those type of things, a job. We really want to attack it at the individual level and see what help we can provide them towards a successful community reentry. Now, I'm going to turn this next slide over to Ken because he kind of developed it, but it's just an overview. And yes, it's pretty complicated, but it kind of gives you an overview of what the offender goes through as part of the process. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, and it's probably a little difficult to read. Hopefully you have a version in front of you, but real simplistic version of the criminal justice flow here. We did that intentionally. There's a lot of variables. It can get down into the weeds really quickly. So again, this is very 50,000 foot view. You'll see 3 swim lanes. There's a diversion swim lane on top. There's an in custody in the middle, and there's an out of custody on the bottom. You'll note that in the upper left, it starts with arrest, obviously. And we did want to represent the mental health crisis stabilization facility diversion potential along the top. So you can see some folks qualify for that, and assuming they meet that stabilization period, charges are filed, and they go through release on the upper right side. For the most part, we know that law enforcement takes those individuals into custody and they go to the jail for booking. So now we're in that middle swim lane on the left side. And we had kind of emphasized this before. There's the RSCJ, or book and release, as you guys would know it. That's a 14% pressure relief valve for the jail, right? We utilize that a lot. There's a lot of in and outs that come in. Assuming that they don't qualify for that, they move into that kind of middle range of the middle swim lane. Obviously, there's first appearance and the ultimate court decision that happens in the yellow and the blue. But you'll see some dotted line boxes. This is a future state look with a little bit of current state kind of baked in. So the dotted line boxes are more future state. Today, we go through classification to understand where we can place them in the facility. And then we move them out of the second floor kind of stabilization area right after that. In the future, we have this concept of the caseworker, or you'll see it referenced as CW, performing triage of these individuals. You know, we have to work out the details as to when they would do that triage and specifically a risk needs assessment. Oftentimes when individuals come in the door, they need time to detox, to stabilize. We can't meet with them the day after and perform a risk needs assessment. So eventually when that stabilization happens, the caseworker preps their case file. Ultimately, the courts may decide to release them. And there's not a lot we can do in terms of offering programming and services at that point, you know, for the short stays. If the individual does volunteer for programming and services, certainly we'll have that capability through the Community Corrections Center, the new housing tower, and even the jail. We'll have lots of programming space available and offerings. You'll see a few of them here: mental health, drug and alcohol, anger management, etc. At any point during that process, that individual could fail to comply, and obviously the courts have to come back in and make some decisions on what they want to do. You will see in the middle, there's a release option in the blue section, court decision section. Obviously, we've got alternative sentencing that can happen. It happens today. We have a very small number of electronic home monitored individuals. That could be expanded. There's jail alternative programs. The courts can release with reentry requirements, where we would connect them up with the release and reentry service providers that hopefully we've got a connection with and are also operating services in the Community Correction Center, as well as their external places of business. So these individuals would have, you know, some navigation as they leave the facility, be brought over into some kind of wraparound service model where, you know, cognitive behavioral health type, you know, functions can be performed. You'll see there's a lot of offerings here, and we've got a slide, I think, in the appendix that lists out some of the different entities that perform these services for us today, whether it be through, you know, probation, through the jail or our mental health facilities. But, you know, this was just to represent kind of what that future state might be. We'd have quite a bit of time to develop this in more detail. So it's not locked in by any means, but this is our conceptual on how this would flow. So questions or comments?
We just kind of want to provide a flow chart so you could see how the flow goes through the jail. And at any one of these boxes, commissioners, if you have, you know, you want to talk or will have interest in, just let us know, because we're interested in having that dialogue with you on what those look like. But at least this gives you a starting point of what it looks like, you know, going through the jail's operation. So next slide.
Could I ask,
Yes.
so you said the dotted boxes are the areas that we need, you're suggesting that there be future investment in, that we don't have these services, or we don't have a firm model right now. And then which of those boxes would you imagine, which services would be at the Community Corrections Center?
It's coming up.
Okay.
It would be the
It's
box
in
in
this
the
box
upper
right
right in
here,
the middle.
but a more in-depth look is coming up, so you can look at the actual program.
So the release and reentry, that's when folks are released and they might actually get services out in the community.
Correct.
This would be the CCC.
Okay. Got it, okay.
So we're,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I mean, we're currently doing the mental health services in the jail. I mean, we have our own mental health division, in addition to the healthcare division.
Mm-hmm. And I'll speak a little bit more in a couple slides here to that mental health things that we have going on.
Because I think just since it's in the box, it seems like
Yeah,
it's a future
no,
thing. It's not
well-
actually just a future thing. We are doing that.
And there are some anger management classes out at Geiger and some,
Some cognitive.
yeah. But in general, you see these things at the.
Just a map, right,
Right.
just a flow to give everyone a concept, because it's hard to imagine when you're sitting back and just taking it all in. So we really wanted to kind of develop kind of a roadmap to look at, so.
Are you thinking about around the kind of booking first appearance phase, something along the lines of the intake and release center that I know it's been kind of
Yep.
fits and starts? Is that in the thought process
It's
here?
in the thought process of the model too as well. And we have, it's gonna be a 5-year build if the voters do approve it and we build a jail. We have time to work on these and ideally, we would get the pilots going and start working on some of with the limited space that we have. But we could start our efforts towards working towards those things.
But like, you have a question mark there. So I think it's important that and these are things that I think that the voters are gonna wanna know, how these dollars are gonna be invested, and are we gonna invest it in a better book and release center, and could we use some dollars just with the temporary book and release facility in the interim? There's just a lot of things to discuss, so I don't know why you had a question mark there. Book and release question mark.
That's just a decision in a.
Well, there's a lot of decisions in here.
But I have a yes, no.
Have to be
Anything that you see that's a diamond shape is just a decision where we can split, it either goes one way or the other.
Oh,
It's no, if you're a book and release, no, then you go into first appearance. If you're a yes, you drop down into the lower out of custody.
Did you fail to comply? It's a question mark, I'm sorry, yeah.
Right, I just think that maybe it needs dotted lines around it if it's an investment point for the,
We could,
for the county. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, we certainly could upgrade that.
If we're gonna do it with this current booking space, we know that's not possible.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, that's just,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the dotted versus the square.
All great questions, so.
Well, and
And we need to be deliberate about what program we put in place, because it needs to be measurable. It needs to have good outcomes. We need to have the understanding right away that it's voluntary and that we can't make them do the programming, but we want to have those junctions in there, those very deliberate about what our offering is to make sure that it's sustainable and that we have a good model for it, so.
it just seems to me, from what I've learned so far, from listening to your expertise as well as the tours you've done of some of the other facilities, that a very intentional book and release area with first appearances and a courtroom is like vital to anything else in the system, right? Like diverting initially is critical. Having a proper system to divert and not have people sit in jail when they don't need to be there, or those that need to be there, right? Having that system up front is really, really, really critical to the whole system down the road.
But that includes not just the detention facility, it includes all the other pieces
Right.
of the criminal justice system.
So I would want to know what those, like a general cost of providing all of that up front, because if we don't, then it seems like even if you do all these services at the end, the more reentry or in custody programs and services, the jail bed number doesn't ever really change, at least in the first. You might have people not recidivate, but I don't know. If we're really gonna try and get our jail numbers down, that whole, like a really strong diversion strategy, policy, and book and release center is really important. And then that's just what I'm hearing. I'm not an expert.
But that, I'm just gonna say, that's part of what I think as we look at the 13th judge. That's part of that conversation with that committee that's gonna be coming together. So we're not gonna have those numbers right away because we've gotta get commitments from, is there gonna be a judge that's willing to be there, or a court commissioner? Is there a prosecutor that's willing to be there on off time? And all of that. So I see that as part of that conversation that's gonna be happening as we look at, with bringing on the 13th judge, because you've gotta have all those people come together. Unless you can get a commitment at the Law and Justice Council, have that conversation there as well. But I think that's the continuous conversation at every different committee level we have to have. And the cost is, we're gonna have to figure out the cost. Because with the prosecutor and the public defenders and all of that, you've got unions that will be involved to get them there, so it's So that's definitely part of what we're trying, want to accomplish as we have these conversations. I don't know if we're gonna have a full cost though. I don't know if you can.
It's the front end. We've got some work to do in that committee. I mean, it's gotta come up in that committee and have those conversations. And then we also have to talk about it at the SRLJC because the practitioners are all on the front end, the courts, so that's where that body of work lies, is on the front end and working with the SRLJC and this committee. And so, and it's hard to identify what the cost would be right now, Mr. Waldo, because we need to figure out what the best thing is, the best strategy going forward. And we all know that FTAs are a struggling problem that we have. How we best address those is what has to be determined, so. Any more?
It's all right, we'll keep going. Keep going. No, I appreciate, this is a really, thank you for your work on this flow chart model. It's really, very helpful, yes.
Okay, next slide, please. So I won't read off all of them, but you can see based on their length of stay, like 0 to 15 days, it's a short program. These are the things that we had offered to them. The same goes for the 16 to 30. Am I going too long here?
No, you're good.
Okay. And then, 31 to 90 days, you can see the offerings on it. Down on the bottom, you can see where we're going to be offering these options to. And if you flip to the next slide, those are the longer term stays, and you can see that we'd be working to the Community Correction Center. They can make a request to go to the Community Correction Center as long as they're not a high risk or a security risk anytime. Because we figure if they want to volunteer to do better and be involved with those programs, we want to meet them there where they're at. And so we're always going to have that option for them. But it really, really depends on how long they're in jail, and what options we can have available to them. So, next slide, please. I wanted to kind of just give a little call out on the mental health landscape, and just we're familiar with the Spokane Regional Mental Health Stabilization Center. It takes the municipal and misdemeanor charges and also some of the low-level charges from the county. It's low risk, low need population, strictly voluntary. They do have the withdrawal management and mental health services that are available there. At any time, they can opt out and then they would be transferred over to the jail. It's really a working system that they have right now with the prosecutors, which I think is a very good thing. On the diversion end of it, the front end, if they're identified to have those needs. The existing mental health services, of course, we have municipal misdemeanor and felony charges. All the justices involved get their risk and needs assessed according to the mental health services that we provide. We have a licensed behavioral health agency. Spokane County is one of the only ones that has that license as a true crisis responder. And then down at the bottom, you'll see kind of the services that we offer. We also have the ability to do case management in the mental health department right now. These are some of the things that they're involved with that helps, develop a transition plan on when they go back out to the community. And so we're very proud of the services that we offer. And I think that we have a pretty good flow as it is right now, but there's opportunity for more. And that's why I think that focus group is going to be important on the SRLJC to identify that, including some therapeutic courts. There's a lot to be looked at as far as what we're doing with this part of it. Some of the other things that we offer at the jail right now, we do have the MAP program for the Vivitrol, and then we work with methadone for the Spokane Regional Health District for the methadone program as well. This is just kind of an idea. The MHPs conduct about 8,000 suicide assessments per year in the jail. And then the diversion program with the peer support is also pre-release while in custody and post-release as well. On the next slide, we hope to expand those services like we were saying. We're going to go attack it from a more individualized planning process. We're also going to still be involved with the 5177 diversion programs and work with the community, the county prosecutors, and then our care coordination partners that we work on the bottom. We want to expand to have a therapeutic floor for mental health. Right now, it's done through the doorway, for the cells. We want an actual floor to open up and have, we have assigned housing on a floor, which is 4 East, the jail, but it's still behind the door. We want to open up classworks. We want to get, the mental health providers or practitioners up on the floor, having those classes, daily interaction and working with them, and then bring services in from the outside if we, have the opportunity to do so. And then you can see that we want to expand into a larger population. Some of the programming is that group anger theory, management you were just talking about, life skills, job readiness, GED, and then STEM programming as substitute use for programming as well. And then you can see the other things that go to it. And that really kind of lands us on this last slide here. And really what we're going to do is, like we said, it's going to be based on the individual and the risk needs assessment, and then look at these different elements around the outside and see how we can best match them up with those services while they're in custody and while they're on their way out of custody. So that kind of wraps up the overall view of it. If there's questions, we'd be happy to take those now. Scott, did you have anything that you want? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay.
Thank you for the info. Appreciate the helpful charts and breakdown and discussion of priorities. I was trying to figure out, you mentioned case managers, right? So changing this model will require some staffing changes, I assume. So I'm wondering if we have a clearer sense of kind of the M&O, like we talked about before, if we have kind of an idea of what the total cost would be to build, construct, and maintain. Do we have any more specificity on that?
We're going to report back to you with the M&O. We're developing that right now, going through the process to make sure that we have adequate staffing in the places that we have to have adequate staffing. And then also the addition of what the caseworkers, and we know that we're going to need to add some caseworkers to what the overall cost is, how long, and then what, looking at the bond structure on the right-hand side would be able to accommodate on that side. And I don't know that we'll need everything all at once. I think we're going to have to grow into it. I think we're going to have to evaluate the programs that we have and measure the results on it and then add as we need to. And so those are kind of things that we're looking at. But as far as the staffing, the structure of the staffing, we're going to report back probably in the next couple of weeks with what the M&O looks like overall.
And then as part of that, will you be able to say, my understanding of how the timeline would work if it passes is there'd be a bond at the beginning, right? And so there'd be a certain amount needed on a yearly basis to pay back that bond.
Correct.
Trying to figure out like at what point in time funding would become available for programs versus construction.
Yeah, and I think that's why the 5 years works in our favor. It gives us an opportunity and a kind of a grace period to evaluate what we're doing and design our models moving forward. I don't have the exact figures, and I don't want to put Randy on the spot back there in the corner, but that's what we're looking at. That's what we contemplated. So
yeah, every year, Commissioner, because the way we develop the financial model, if you will, every year for incremental growth in sales taxes goes into an opportunity for M&O, criminal justice, improvements to the system, programming, and other sorts of investments in public safety and whatnot. So that's what as Mike refers to the right side of the column, that shows that growing dollar amount year over year that are available for investments and other than the physical structure itself.
Couldn't you also, though, bond up front for some of those, to pay for some of those services, like we're talking about doing with the Regional Homeless Authority? If you know that there's a dollar amount coming in, I mean, it's a guaranteed sales tax coming in the door.
I guess if we know exactly what we're going to do, we could certainly look at that as an option. We haven't contemplated it to date. We really just focus on bonding for the facility and then seeing what is available. And if we need some more available on the front end, and you can level set that over time, that might be an option.
And it's also still talking to the cities as they get
Correct.
their percentage as to what,
Are they willing to
what are
invest?
they willing to invest back in? So,
And that's part of the educational side of it, having those meetings, talking, describing the model, and, looking for partnership.
Do you know, when we expect to kind of have the M and O figured out?
I have it now, I want to vet it
Yeah.
before I bring it
No, I
back
get
here.
that.
So, it's prepared, it's done, but I just need to vet to it, so I'm ready next week or so. And we don't have the actual, we know what the debt service would be toward it, but it could have money changes in it as well. We hope not, we don't anticipate that, but it will, because it's in a 5% design phase right now, and along with those type of things. My main thing is to set up the housing units, make sure we have the staff to handle all the housing units. And as it looks right now, we do have the staff to manage the housing units. And then evaluate what the flow chart that you saw, what that's gonna take as far as additional staffing. And then I should have a really good idea. I'll assess salaries to it as well, so you have an idea of what it is.
So you're thinking, even though I know we're down, how many correctional officers right
I
now?
think we're at 30 now.
But you're saying you still are finalizing your model, but you're looking at how many we have budgeted in our current budget.
Correct.
If they were all full,
That's correct.
filled, they could supervise and support all 3 facilities.
As it looks right now, I don't want to commit yet because I haven't truly vetted the numbers, but as it looks right now, it's very close. So,
And a lot of that goes to the layout and design of the new facility,
that's
correct?
correct, yeah, Commissioner, that's correct. Because we gain a better supervision model out of it as well, and so that helps with some of the efficiency and the staffing numbers.
Well, I appreciate all this thoughtful conversation and with the SR. I always start with the J. SRJLC. I still feel like it's kind of behind where we need to be to communicate. And also I'm concerned that we do need more input from the partners in the community that are the ones that would potentially be, delivering the services and working with individuals right now and understanding from their perspective, what are the needs? I would hope that we're going to get some more feedback from just those who have been justice involved about where investment could be made in the system to improve lives. And so do you have plans to reach out to other community groups that work with those who are?
Yes.
Okay, because there's 3 individuals on the,
RL.
thank you, SR, I cannot get that acronym. SRJLC. I still didn't get it.
SRLJC.
I need a different acronym.
Just say council.
Law and Justice Council, there you go. I'm just gonna call it that.
okay, and I have Commissioner French that wants to comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Mike and Ken, thank you so much. This is a very comprehensive look at what we have ahead of us and stuff. And of course, the real metric is without the ballot measure, all of this is just nothing more than a pipe dream. And the programs go away, the detention goes away. And so this is a complete package. It's not just about detention, it's a complete package. And the other element that's most critical to moving this forward is we got to get the bench on board. They've got to become partners with us in terms of putting into place some of these programs and stuff. Otherwise, we'll have the funding, but we won't have the support of the bench. So just an observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just, my last comment is just that, I'm hoping we can circle back on the population projections that you're basing the new buildings on, because I'm really concerned that if we overbuild and overspend on, buildings and beds, there won't be any funding for any of these things. And so it really is tied together. Like if we're gonna invest in all these programs with the community input that we need to make sure it's done right, the population estimates are not based on implementing any of these things. Diversion, programming, so I still am very concerned that this is a long list of great things that I think will really improve our criminal justice system. But if we overbuild, there won't be funds. And I'm also concerned about the first 5 years. I think our community is really concerned about our mental health and drug crisis. And we need to be at least making some micro steps to invest in things that don't require necessarily like the new facility in the first 5 years. Because we have a lot of people out there that could take advantage of treatment, could take advantage of diversion as appropriate. But, that's just a question. How could we do that? Just taking baby steps to improve our system in the first 5 years to address the needs that I think a lot of voters are looking at out in the community.
So the population forecast is based on historical trends. That's what it's based on. And historically, what it's been with no changes either for or against it. And so when you're looking at implementing some programs or something to impact the population, it's assumptions. And when you're making those assumptions, we don't have good detail around it to make sure that those predictions are absolute. And so the historical trend is what I base the forecast on, straight line. And so those are some things I would say we want to take into consideration.
And I would say too, based on your discussion a couple weeks ago, that if 14% should be in jail for a limited period of time, they're already being released, booked and released, because I think that's what you stated with the sheriff here, that we're already 14% lower than where we should be at this point in time. So we gotta take that into account too, that we don't have the space right now for that. So we're already behind on that, even if you're just looking at population trends, where we're at on what.
Well, I would push back on that. I don't agree that all 14% of those folks that we need to be paying to keep them in jail. There may be some that could benefit, but then on the flip side, we also have folks that are sitting in jail for 2 nights waiting for a first appearance that maybe don't even need to be there. Yeah. So I mean, that's where this whole book and release with partnership from the courts and all of our other partners at the public defender and prosecutors' offices are really important. Or else we're just kind of perpetuating, I think, the same system that maybe is not very efficient for everyone.
Yeah, and you recall from those 14%, I think it was 86% were failure to appears, which means they've already been involved with the law. And so what we need to do is to have a logical way to have them have their court appearance one way or the other, so that we're not contributing to the FTA problem. I mean, that's the reality of it, you know what I'm saying, so.
And just to make a comment about the population model, I think we have a meeting coming up, don't we? We'll still chat about that. Okay. I did meet with JFA, who did the previous modeling. It sounds like the biggest difference between their model and what you're doing is the future population projection, whether you look at the entire population or the more at risk to be incarcerated, right? Males of a certain age. So let's chat about that. I hope we can stay open to that if it makes sense to be looking at targeted populations or slices that are more likely to be incarcerated. That could potentially be a way to look at it that is more right-sized and doesn't require as many beds that cost money. But anyway, so we'll chat about that.
We have a meeting this week, I think, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the benefit of history is that you can either learn from it or try and avoid the mistakes that were made. And the mistake that's made with the jail that we have is it was undersized. And we have paid the price for 30 years because it was undersized. So, I hope we keep that in mind, that we don't want to repeat the mistake that we're living with right now. We got to be smarter about how do we plan for the future. And so, just an observation. Thank you.
One of my concerns with JFA, I mean, and I sat through all of those meetings when they really got down to how you bring down the population in the jail, it was essentially saying, we looked at your historical data, you could bring down your population by anybody with this charge, let them out. Anybody who was charged with this, let them out. I mean, that was essentially their whole plan, their whole equation was just anybody charged with this, just let them out. Anybody charged with that, just let them out too. And it's like, yeah, I could do that too. I could point at a bunch of different charges that, hey, we let those people out. Look, now our jail's not full. But it's like, does that really keep the community safe? I mean, I don't know. I didn't like their method that they went. I mean, it was in the building where WorkSource is in the Envision Center. It was upstairs in the big conference room. You were at all of them too, and that was essentially what their whole plan came down to. Anybody charged with this, just let them out. Anybody with a charge like this, let them out too. And I don't think that's really a good method.
Well, the book and release center was designed to target that 14% because they're going to take them to the jail. And it was during COVID. And we're trying to look for ways to not have them all come to the booking area part of it. So when you look at it, you're talking about that 14%, that FTA population that the law enforcement could do a quick, charge, turn around, get back on the streets. What was missing was a key element that Commissioner French, Commissioner Cooney and I saw, which is the magistrate at the front end of it. They can really make the difference on the charge. They could say, okay, this is where you're going. Yes, you're going to jail. No, this is what a resolution of the case. Something besides just letting them back out the door. Some targeted plan. And so that's really what was missing. There were some other little minor elements, that we had to work our way through on the warrant process and some of the other things. But really, that's when they identify the population that could go to that. Ms. Yates identified the FTA or the 14% that were SCGR anyway. And it was in conjunction with the COVID measure so that we could divert the traffic out of the primary booking area. So again, we're back on that 14% of people that we're letting out on the front end. And I think we have to do a deep dive into that 14% and see what really is the best model for it.
Well, and I just want to mention that there was efforts made, and we talked about them here, to do more pretrial programs. There's 2 programs now that Pretrial Services runs to support different work programs, out of jail programs. We were doing the free rides and other things to get people to come back for their hearings or go to their mandatory drug check-ins or whatever they're supposed to be doing per the court's orders. So there has been some, we've taken some steps, and that's probably why our average daily population is lower today than it was back before the pandemic, even with that 14%. Because that 14%, that order's been in place for a long time, way before the pandemic. So, I just think we need to take into consideration the last 5 years of reforms that have been put in. Small though they are making some sort of difference because our average daily population's down since like 2012 or something. So I'm just saying, if you go 30 years back, I think that's the concern. Like, are you taking into consideration some of the changes that have occurred and the investments that have been made with the MacArthur funds?
Like the Blake decision?
Well, Blake is one of those.
That's a big chunk of the population of gross misdemeanors that are not there right now. If they were booked for the charge for the controlled substance, they would be back in the jail again. So those are some of the the ebbs and flows, and I understand where you're coming from. So.
But didn't you go back 30 years because that's industry standard if you go back? Because we wanted to look 30 years into the future. So they say, look, 30 back. You know, it's an equal amount backwards as forwards, right? Yeah.
It isn't truly, I don't think it's truly 30 years. I went back as far as like 1997 as I could get data from, you know what I'm saying? So,
And I think it's not gonna be perfect. And we know too, we have more people that are in our jail that are there long-term pre-trial for violent crimes than we've had in the past. You know, so there's things that are gonna be different on both ends that pre-trial diversion isn't gonna help those. It's just not gonna be perfect as we look through, and we just have to do the best we can to make assumptions, because that's what all this is gonna be, is making assumptions.
it's a forecast. It's like all forecasts, you know, you're making certain assumptions, you're going into it, and, you know, you try to get as best you can, but when you go out 30 years, you know, your first 5 or 7 years is pretty good, you know, but as you get out wider and more changes in the criminal justice system happens, who knows what other, you know, one, for instance, is, you know, the gross misdemeanor change in the Blake decision. You know, how will that impact us? We don't know how that's gonna impact us yet, you know, so some things that we need to consider.
Well, I think that we generally have agreement that we want to go to direct supervision.
Yeah.
The way that the downtown jail was designed, because it's safer for everyone. The staff, the inmates, allows a lot more freedom and humane treatment and safety. So, you know, we want to get rid of the doubling up. And then we know Geiger never was intended to be used the way it's used, and it's fallen apart. And we really also, for humane, you know, how about AC, you know, for folks?
Yeah.
We need a replacement for that. I think we have agreement around those two areas. I think it's how much population growth is the challenge. So definitely we need some new beds. It's just how many, because it does take away from potentially what we can invest in other parts of the system, like that the blueprint reform has been calling out for 10 years, right? Over 10 years. So we'll keep chugging along.
Okay.
I think one of the, Commissioner Waldorf, you brought up a really good observation in terms of how much did those programs to MacArthur impact the current jail population. And we'd like to be able to put a finger on it and say this is the exact data that we were able to track to show what impact it had. Unfortunately, that data doesn't exist. There wasn't any robust tracking of pre-measurables and then during the pilot and then post-measurables, which is very different from what Mike's now doing with the supported release to track, understand what our baseline is today before it started, what's happening during the program and what the end results are. So then the commissioners, Esther LJC and others, can make some informed decisions on where some targeted investments that have real outcomes could be made to manage the whole justice system better, if you will. So that's just an observation for some of our challenges, to be able to really pinpoint what an impact any of those programs had on the jail population.
Anything else? I hope this was informative and got us to a point to where, yeah, we can start moving forward. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's gonna take us to Jeff McMorris, miscellaneous items. Jeff, there he is.
We're watching.
Very good. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so ARP, what we know, what we don't know. Obviously, Congress and the White House came to their debt ceiling deal over the weekend. The vote is expected in the House tomorrow, the Senate a few days later. GFOA has sent around an email that they have not found any direct clawbacks that would impact us at this point. It's a 90-page document, 99 pages actually. But when you go through it, there's 20 pages under the rescission of unobligated funds. There's 81 sections, if you include the subsections, about 115 sections, 65 of which have terms such as the unobligated balances of amounts made available by Section 2007 of Public Law 117-2 are hereby permanently rescinded. We have not had time to even begin to think about trying to track down what any of that means. We don't know if GOA has either. That being said, rental assistance, when it was clawed back, there was no congressional action involved. Treasury decided to do it and do it. So I think it'd be wise to obligate. And then going forward, if we find out we can make changes, you can still make changes keeping everything obligated if you're feeling comfortable with that. So that's what we kind of know and don't know at this point. Over the last 10 days, Heather, along with Melissa, who's new, trial by fire for her, and Jessica have had about 10 contracts signed. There are 5 outstanding, 4 of which they've promised us today. Latos said they will tomorrow. So we should have every contract signed. And then if you guys go forward with what's on the 2 p.m. consent, there'll be 3 MOUs to sign. Per our policy, the chair has signed outside contracts, the CEO has signed MOUs inside the county. Those MOUs would be 2 with Ashley, 1 with Randy. The IT one, since Ashley has been the lead on that, and the staffing one would be through Ashley. The facilities one, because facilities bubbles up through Randy. If you guys wanted to make any changes to that bucket without de-obligating, having Randy sign it, anything under his departments would be allowed to be used. So we were thinking that would just give you guys the most flexibility going forward. So I was quickly going to talk through the 7 resolutions you'll see at 2 o'clock. The first one is amending 0813, which amended another resolution along the way. That is the S3R3, the $2 million we discussed last week. They requested changing it from stormwater to water and sewer. That is allowed because they applied under the multi-category RFP. There's no financial impact, it's just a change. They have got us all the necessary paperwork and that contract is signed. As long as you guys approve it later today. And then 0812 is the revenue replacement ordinance. So that one, we need to correct the indirects amount. Your indirects have been reduced by about 220,000. 200,000 is from the crosswalk VOA, which is getting pushed over to Home ARP, and then 21,000 and change from the risk management funds that were returned. So those changes would be in there. The revenue replacement ordinance, which includes indirects and interest, would also be amended to allow broadband up to $10 million as one of its allowed uses. And we also are highlighting, in addition to just broadly facilities, we're calling out the clean buildings regulations that the state's requiring, just to make sure those are called out. Any questions around that one? The next will be amending 0695, which was the crosswalk funds. So that's taking out that 2 million because they're maybe receiving the Home ARP. That one, you'll see a few number changes because originally you awarded 4.5 million to the category, but then we had to add to the category because there were 6.3 million in awards. So we're having to change all those numbers, but the bottom line is you're reducing the 2 million and the 200,000 that goes with it. The next one's a pretty simple one, the 0599 is just striking the 10 million broadband. That's where that was originally awarded, because as we already talked, it'll be in revenue replacement. On the broadband, we will need to put out an RFP. Nothing to do with obligations. Revenue replacement is obligated, but per our own county rules, which has come up in the New Jay discussion of the last week, we still have to do an RFP because there's multiple broadband groups around. So we put out an RFP. It would require open access. It would require digital equity component. It would be for either matches and or projects. But we thought we might as well get that one open and going. So just per our previous, just kind of looking for head nods, if you guys are okay with us getting that out in the next few days. It'd be open for its standard 3 weeks, come back before the board for any awards. You guys all good with that?
Can you repeat that?
The broadband 10 million is obligated because it's in revenue replacement.
Okay.
So from a congressional standpoint, it's obligated. Per county procurement rules, because there's different broadband groups in the world, we do have to put out an RFP. The RFP would be around digital equity and open access, and it would be for matches and or projects. So unless a private sector firm was going to put in open access, it's not going to qualify. But county rules, I'm told, require us to RFP it outside of ARP rules.
In order, yeah. And since Broadlink is not a county department, they can't just be allocated within the county.
We were able to do the 400,000 directly to Broadlink because that was for startup costs, and they are the only group that is doing what they're doing. But startup cost.
And we didn't have the agreement set yet at that point in time, so it's kind of within the county department.
The startup costs are different than projects on the ground, which multiple groups can do. So if y'all are good with that, we'll get that RFP out. Nothing gets awarded till you guys sign off on it.
It's still obligated.
It's obligated by
revenue
nature of
replacement.
revenue replacement. It's just not part of the revenue replacement that we can directly assign like we are the other things that are internal. Next is amending 0444, which is the risk management. So that's that 221,000 that they returned, making the adjustments for indirects. And then we're gonna amend 0153, that's the original ordinance that did the first tranche of category allegations. We put 2.4 million into 1.14, which is public health services. We spent 2.3 and change. So there's $76,000 there that was never awarded. Because it was never awarded, there were never any indirects assigned. We just need to amend that we actually only award the 2.3 million. So we can put it on these other ones. So that's a correction for that 76,000 sitting there. And then the final one is actually doing the new allocations. So that's the 3.3, the 3.4, and the 3.5. So in 3.3, if you look through the ordinances in your packet, everything that's changed is in red, just to draw your eyes to it quickly. 3.3, which is public sector workforce, the staffing, it can technically be used for any public sector workforce, but we came to this number based on the needs we've seen in planning. It's also the plug number that makes us balance. It ended up at $732,229.98. It is about 20,000 higher than you saw last week. When we crunched all the numbers, it inched upward a little bit. And then in category 3.4, effective service delivery, again, that could be spent on anything, but we will have an MOU prepared that will be signed later this afternoon that would direct it to ERP. And that's, we came to $8 million because that's the ERP number. And then the 3.5, which is administrative needs, That's the one that's around facilities, to include the fair roof, the public works windows, the parks admin building, the campus facilities green building upgrades that are in the current fiscal budget, the courtroom on the second floor, and 500,000 of contingency, as we know, inflationary pressures right now. That is what brought us to the 8.466 million. Again, that can be moved around for other facilities stuff, but that's how we came to the number, and there'll be the MOU that would also be signed later today between Randy and the CEO. So those are the 7 resolutions on your 2 p.m. consent. And Dale Anderson in legal has reviewed all of them. And between Heather's shop and Dale and myself, really hope this does everything we need to do to keep the funds local. Questions?
So one of the comments from the feds that I heard over the weekend is like, is it 30 billion that they're thinking they're clawing back? Was that the right?
Of ARP, I saw that in the headlines. What I could never find in my searches was what categories of ARP that is taking back.
Yeah, so it seemed like a lot, so.
That's a big chunk.
So as I heard that number, I was thankful for all the hard work that you guys have done to ensure that this gets obligated, not clawed back. Like I said, we saw that happen on the rent assistance, which we have no idea what was happening or coming. So I think, I just want to say thank you, for doing all the hard work for us to get it obligated by May 31st, which gets us a month ahead of the reporting deadline of June 30th. Because I think that's important, because as we have it in revenue replacement, that is still then available, through revenue replacement or the indirects and all of that. It's obligated now, still available for use, but I just want to say thank you for all the hard work of getting that accomplished. And then it was GFOA, as you said, the 90-page document from them is, they're not sure how this is going to get clawed back either at this point, just being at the conference.
They are feeling right now, they're not seeing where the SLURF funds, which are our portion of ARP, the state and local fiscal recovery funds, they're not seeing where they're called out. I don't know if they've had time to track all of those references to other laws and actually run that all the way to the end. And searching over the weekend, just for news, I did find where other counties are certainly doing what you guys are doing, particularly around broadband. For the same issues, they were waiting, they had their broadband in the category, waiting for options this fall. And one county back east was doing the exact same thing. They were putting it into revenue replacement and putting facilities. They were doing that same kind of movement of funds, very similar to us. And if in the end this is all for naught, you guys can make changes, but I think we have it locked down to the best of our abilities with what we know.
So another fun acronym, the SLURF funds. So that, are those the recovery,
That's us.
well, but anything that came to us, or just a certain type of ARPA funds that came to cities and counties?
So the SLURF stands for State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. So the direct allocations to cities, counties, and direct allocation to the state are under the SLURF. Then you have the other funds like the Home ARP, which came through HUD. Some of those go to Commerce for the balance of state. But if you're an entitlement community, which is roughly 50,000 or larger, you get those direct funds.
Right, I guess I'm just interested in, most of the funds that we're looking at obligating are,
All under SLURF.
okay, because I've read, there were several articles that I read that said that they're not at risk.
They're not at risk based on
because
this high level.
They're not, they're kind of considering that they've already given those out to cities and counties.
Well, it was interesting at GFOA, they put up the definition of obligated, which clearly stated to be obligated, has to be under contract with the end user. Made it very clear. And when half the audience walked out, it's when a person from the dais who is very new to the job said, well, we obligated it all when we gave to you, which is what you probably just read. And we're like, well, that's not the definition you just gave
This is
us.
something from the National League of Cities from 5 days ago, so that their reading of it is that.
Well, that's what Treasury said at GFOA, but I can tell you nobody in the room agreed with that.
Okay.
So they could be quoting that, but that's just, it's not their own definition of obligation. And that's how we ended up losing the rental assistance funds, which makes me nervous to use. I don't think they're gonna, just because we said, well, your person in Portland said, I don't think that holds up. Any thoughts on that, Heather?
I would agree. So there's been no new analysis today of what the debt ceiling deal, the proposed deal that was agreed to Friday, whether or not those funds are included in that or not.
They're not specifically called out that we have found. My concern is just like when the rental assistance came back, was clawed back, there was no congressional action that did that. That was done by Department of Treasury. So within the authority of federal departments, especially when it comes to closing out this fiscal year and then the process going into the next budget, I think these still could come into play. Whether you need to have it done tomorrow or a month from now, I think is a debate that's open to debate.
When I was back in DC in January, Eric Johnson and I were meeting with all of the delegation from the state of Washington. It was a concern then amongst the representatives. So I think it's still gonna be, I mean, the debt deal is, it's a deal in principle, it's not finalized yet. So I mean, I think we just have to be cognizant of that. But I had 3 Democrat representatives on the west side tell us to go talk to our Republican representatives on the east side. When Eric and I were having conversations about this with counties' funds, talking about the potential clawback of ARP dollars. So it's definitely on their mind back in DC. So hopefully it's not gonna be there, but that's why I think it's our best bet to protect it. And just make sure it's not an issue, but it definitely was on congressional representatives that Eric and I met with back in January.
The best I can find is that 30 billion number of ARP, but that doesn't mean the SLRF is in it.
Right, and that's the number that I heard this weekend on one of the news shows.
And so, but you guys can keep making changes. Technically, anytime you do a change, you're de-obligating or re-obligating, but if you do it at the same time, as long as we do it before some date that comes up, then you can keep making changes. You can also roll the dice. Yes. That's y'all's decision.
How much would be in category 3.4?
3.4, 8 million even. That's the ERP category.
Okay, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet you sent me last week, and I think it said 8.1. Does that include the, additional IT requests? For 100,000?
That was something that was under discussion at some point.
So that's not.
At this point, is 8 million even.
Okay. And then, what do these resolutions reflect for comp plan staffing?
That's the 732,229.98. Last week, I think it was in the 708 range, or it might have been 608 because it went down 100,000 with the 8 million went up 100,000. But we did end up with about 23,000 more in all the indirect calculations, and we put it there because that's our fund number to make us balance.
I just want to let everybody know, because I wasn't able to chat with Commissioner French last week, that I was looking at the list of projects and thinking that it's a good list, but just trying to brainstorm some other needs. And so I came up with idea of $100,000 for the rideshare program, and that's the MacArthur program that's not currently being funded. So I think Mike just walked out. I don't know if he has any update on that. And the other was a $200,000 down payment on language access needs. So I did chat with Ashley about that. I don't know if there's any possibility of including those, or if it's more appropriate that they be revenue replacement later on the road. But I just want to let Commissioner French know that, because it's something this is all last minute discussion throwing out there for brainstorming consideration as well.
Any language stuff that would be done by the county, I think would fit under effective service delivery, would not require an RFP, because it'd be county. Rideshare would require an RFP, assuming there's multiple nonprofits that do it.
Even if we already have a current contract with Pioneer for the work.
If other people do it, we'd have to let them bid on it, is my understanding. Is that correct, Chris?
That's the same.
Generally,
language.
without looking at the specifics of the program, yeah.
And that would be the same thing for language line, so just because Superior Court's using it, that doesn't, I think, mean that we wouldn't be doing an RFP process. I think we would have to also look at that for what vendors would we potentially utilize.
So in that case, if they both require RFPs, revenue replacement would make more sense. Same way as broadband, revenue replacement is locked down. There is that 6.9 million there that has no direction as of this moment. So that would be something the board would consider.
And if, for the language access idea, if it was things like screens, signs, et cetera, those could be effective service delivery, but it might need to be parsed out.
I would.
Does that make sense?
If
Depends
it's,
on what you're buying, right?
well, if you're, for clawback purposes, I would say do it under revenue replacement, just like broadband. If we get to the point where there's no concerns about clawback, then you could add it to effective service delivery and do it back. Also, the RFP process will be the same either way. It's just, if you do it from revenue replacement, that keeps the funds obligated. For ARP's purposes. But allows us to meet our own county process requirements.
Which is not require us to have it identified today, but then can look at that for a future item. To investigate it and talk about it.
I think those are great ideas. And so knowing where to, great ideas.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I just think the RIDE program, we should be putting money into if we have anything like ASAP. Because every single judge division that we met with in the last 4 months is like, it really works. So I know Mr. Sparber said that maybe MacArthur is going to come back with some more funds, but there's a gap right now. So where there's no free ride services being offered. So it does impact, people coming back for their first appearances and people going to where they're supposed to be going. Oh, there he is, right there. I said your name when you appeared.
Now what did I do?
No, just the free ride program.
Yeah.
Just that everything I've heard is that it's effective use of funds for our criminal justice system. But wondering if MacArthur is gonna be able to give us some more funds for that, or if we should be looking at other sources.
Yes. So MacArthur did respond. They are gonna transfer the funds for us out of existing funds that we have right now to support it. It's about eight months of support.
Good.
For
That's
the
great.
rideshare program is really well received by the courts and by the treatment facilities that, they give free rides to point of destination rides. So yes, MacArthur Foundation has rolled those funds over. Now sustainable, moving forward, that's another conversation.
So Mike, I think we need to get the data, because you were supposed to be tracking the data on that, correct?
We have the data.
So yeah, so that'd be another presentation, I think would be good
Okay.
to put on the agenda sooner than later then.
Okay, and we do have a supporting, that's one we track the data on, so we have that.
And is that effective right away? Or do we know when that will happen?
I think it starts the 1st of June.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that's an update since last week.
But
There you go.
let me double check.
Okay.
So.
Great.
So all of these are on your 2 o'clock agenda. The last thing on the back of the last one, there is just an updated laundry list of every category where all the funds went, just kind of to memorialize that. So, if you see anything that you'd like an amendment, let us know.
Could I ask one last question about, so the contracts that are already out for the funds that were allocated to outside groups, last year, I guess we'll get more information as the debt ceiling deal gets signed and implemented. So if, I know you were gonna do like progress reports, Heather, with those different organizations to see like, hey, you've only spent 10% of your money and you've had the money for a year. So I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. But if some of those organizations end up not spending all of the dollars over the next year because they can't hire staff, things that they wanted to do that they weren't able to do, we had talked about looking at that and then over the next year, like reallocating if needed, but I guess that depends on what happens at the federal level, because we wouldn't be able to reallocate it if
they pull this obligation thing, no. If that ends up not being an issue, the board has through the end of 2024 to do any reallocations.
Okay.
So all the contracts were written with a June 24 check-in that.
It gives us 6 months.
Correct.
To look at what those.
So as of June, we present to you, XYZ only spent 10%. Are you comfortable with their plan for the next 90%? Or would you like to reallocate said funds? So we'd be pulling that data as of.
Well, Heather, we had talked about it, you would be doing a check-in at the end of this year though, to see where.
Starting at the end of this year to get through all of the contracts, it will take me and my team a significant amount of time to get through everybody so that I have a decent amount of time to turn that information around to you guys so that you have time to make your decisions without feeling under the gun.
And won't every quarterly report show spent?
Correct.
So you will get that every calendar quarter.
So you could give us that information by request?
Yes.
Okay.
I will give it to you right now as of March 31st. It's not a very big number.
Yeah, they're just starting to pull down. Billing is starting to come in.
Got it. But we don't know, it may be that those funds, if they're not spent by 24, the contracts are through 2024.
Correct.
Well, through 26, we just have the 24, June 24 check-in to give the board 6 months.
Because initially it was you had to have it obligated by the end of 24, spent by the end of 26. So in all our contracts, that's how we set it up, so that, set it up with a check-in in mid-June of 24. So that way, if we need to reallocate, just like, risk management, didn't use all their funds. So that way as those things happen, then we'll know at that point in time so we can reallocate. And I would think, I don't know, no one knows what the federal government's gonna do, but if we do all that kind of at the same time, it's just like what we're doing right now, where we're unobligating, reallocating right in the same moment. And so that way it wouldn't affect it.
There's never a second when the dollars are not obligated.
Yes, exactly.
Say aye in unison, please. But we thought it would take 6 months, because just because somebody's not obligated, you might want to bring that group in and actually have a conversation with them and get a better feel.
And they might want to change up what they're doing. Like they thought they would be hiring case managers to help people with housing assistance, but actually what they have found is
We can
people
amend
need help with,
contracts.
a different approach.
As long as it's under the same general authority,
Right.
contracts can be amended without de-obligating.
Got it.
And the ones that we've raced to finish in the last 10 days, I'm sure most of those will need an amendment along the way, but it is signed and obligated. Because amendments are fine.
Thank you, Heather, and so it sounds like you have a new assistant.
Yeah, we finally have replaced the
Great.
last open position, so we are
Great.
fully staffed.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all the work and effort going into this. Okay, so a couple other miscellaneous, and then I think we've got some executive sessions. Great, okay. So one of the miscellaneouses that I want to bring up is office space, because there seems to be some confusion. So how we've always done it is it's based on seniority. And so I am just gonna go through each person to say what their thoughts are on office space. So there's 3 offices here, along the wall, and then there's 3 offices over there. So my office potentially be an open office, if anyone wants to move over here as well. So Commissioner French, pick your office.
Well, since the chair in my office fits the parameters of what I put in it, I'm going to stay exactly where I'm at. But I do agree with you, Madam Chair. It has been the practice of the county for at least the last 20, 30 years. Seniority is what picks the office and stuff. So that's, I see no reason to change that pattern now. So thank you. And yes, I am keeping my existing office. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Stay the heck out.
I believe that you've been in my office at one time. Josh has been in my current
Yes.
office at one time. So it's been the rotating office. So
Yes.
thank you.
I will also be staying. I hate moving.
Creature of habit.
There we go. So I will be leaving my office as I don't like the restroom right
Nobody
next to
likes
it.
that office.
So I do plan to go over to the office on the south side of the new area. And so then the 2 of you are now equals, so you get to choose.
This one?
Yeah, because someone could come over to this office.
Well, you are a former city council member, so you've been elected official longer, so
Oh,
you
you're
should
gonna
probably
give
have
me
the
a-
next choice.
I was sworn in first. No, was I? Anyway.
Yeah, you were.
Okay.
You were.
No, I'm just teasing. I think I'll take the one that is the corner, right, that faces kind of the public safety and the courthouse.
Northwest.
Yes. There we go.
Commissioner
I'll
Jordan?
take the other new office over there.
You don't
Be in
want mine?
the fresh, new, exciting location.
We could have it be all the guys here. The women over there.
So there's a little more distance between the other new office and the restroom, so
Yes.
that'll be my decision-making factor.
No, it is true. So I just want to make sure we just have that all for the record. So since maybe conversations hadn't occurred that I thought had occurred, I just wanted to make sure we got that all finalized. So there we go. Okay, so then.
So are we official to start moving in?
I believe so. I think Gil had indicated recently that we were close on our C of O, but you could all start moving your stuff over there. All the, I haven't been in there in a week, but I think all the office furniture is in place. I'll probably swing through on the walk back across, but I believe you're all ready to start moving over when you're ready.
And on the furniture, I didn't have them put together at the office because I'm going to be choosing, when I moved into this office, I chose some new furniture at that time, and so I will be looking over there. I won't be moving this furniture over. Some of it I may, but figuring out. So that was furniture that was kind of chosen because of timeframes, that if people want to make some changes to some of the furniture, they are welcome to do that as part of the cost of moving offices.
So if we want to talk about any of those things, who's our point? Scott, okay.
Yeah, me, and then Gil will be the one who organizes everything. All the moves, we'll get a mover in place to bring stuff over, or his team to bring some stuff over, so.
We don't have much to move.
In
You have-
facilities, we'll hang stuff on the wall. When I became, I was told I was not allowed to hang anything. It would be hung for me.
I just wanted to mention, I don't believe we have our certificate of occupancy yet.
Yeah.
So we can move stuff in, but you can't actually.
Right.
Use the space.
And I don't know if it's such a big deal over here because of the historic walls. So we'll have to check with Bill on
Yeah,
hanging stuff on the walls or not.
Don't wanna break any rules. They didn't trust me with a
I mean,
hammer and a nail.
that'll be
Yeah.
discussions with Gil.
Yeah.
And then just as looking at, if you do different furniture and that kind of thing, check with Scott. Okay, so, okay, because we've got 3 executive sessions, it sounds like.
Or a few more.
Or more, okay.
Please,
I have a hard noon meeting that I have to get to. It's just a Zoom.
Sure.
But, so,
Hopefully they'll be quick.
Oh.
They could be quick.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with fellow commissioners, last, I think it was either Thursday or Friday, I think it was the Ninth U.S. District Court that overturned the ban on natural gas in the state of California. And so it has turned that whole initiative about anti-natural gas on its head and will put the state in a precarious position with regard to its ban and stuff. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and also that I think there are now 3 lawsuits against the state of Washington with regard to the ban on natural gas. And now with the district court weighing in, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But just wanted to give you information for your edification.
Thank you. Any other miscellaneous items I should ask?
Oh, we had, just really briefly, we had another regional homeless authority conversation, and expect, as you heard from Gavin and Rick and Teresa last week, they're working on some draft governance structure documents and kind of fine tuning the dollar amounts that are out there and could be available, right, to be with a coordinated approach. And so I
Yeah,
think we're
they
gonna see.
reiterated the estimate of around 30 million a year that comes to, countywide. There was a discussion about the makeup of the board on the PDA.
Yes.
There was no agreement on that.
No, we just had an open discussion about how
Um,
many electeds versus how many appointed community members that would have different perspectives and expertise. And a lot of it is thinking about the purpose of the PDA board would be to operate in high level, less about the specific strategies and making sure we had a robust conversation about an advisory group that really is made up of much more experts.
We were about to talk about the advisory group, but then we had more of the robust discussion on the PDA, but never really
Yes.
got to the discussion on the advisory.
Well, yeah, because I think everyone was like, put this person on, but the reality is you don't want a huge 20-member PDA board. You want a fairly small, mid-size PDA board that's really making decisions about allocating funds, getting reports on outcomes and making, more of the high-level decisions. And I think we were getting a little bit confused thinking, well, we need people with this experience and this experience on that PDA board, but really, if we have a really good advisory group that's advising people who are experts on, mental health strategies and substance treatment, all those people don't need to be on the PDA board. So we were wrestling with, those kind of 2 entities. So to be fair, we're wrestling.
You're portraying it that it went much more smoothly than it did. So
No, but it was a good representation again of small cities, and actually it was a really good turnout of participants this
there were more people at that last meeting than have been at probably any meeting all
so
year.
that's a good sign.
They did, I guess, when you think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But when they actually put the calendar up showing we have one more meeting of this group on the 8th, and then on the 15th, that marks 90 days. And then, was it the 28th or 29th? I think 28th. They said they have rented the convention center and they're gonna roll out the plan to the community. The Rick, Gavin, and Teresa, they're gonna present their, blueprint or draft interlocal or MOU or whatever it is, and to the community, I guess. So we're rapidly approaching that 90 days, and we have one more meeting left. I would think make a lot of decisions if they want our input on them.
Yeah.
So, cause I don't know.
That's still a little bit, yeah, they have some goals there, but I think the idea is getting a good draft that has general head nods by June 15th to all the jurisdictions. And then I'm not sure what that process is before it gets kind of rolled out. So I think we just need to be ready to give feedback in the month of June. And if we have any major concerns with the structure, like making sure we make that known. So we should probably try and get a draft before the 8th and circulate it.
I don't think they have a draft. They didn't indicate they had a draft. They said we would have the meeting on the 8th. They would put the draft together to present on the, it's the 28th. So
So maybe
I
we
don't
get
believe
another-
there is a draft for us to get.
Right, so maybe we, after the 8th, we ask them to come to the next Monday meeting and we walk through it or something like that, anyway.
I'll have you make sure that happens and to get it on the calendar.
I will try my best. I will do that.
The draft is in progress.
It's in progress, okay.
We don't quite have enough information to put together a draft that is ready to come in front of.
We don't either.
Isn't that the definition of a draft in progress?
Which, I mean, I think then the group needs to be realistic in that they may need to extend their 90 days, that was optimistic timeline and, but we'd rather do it right than not do it, rather have it be successful and do it right, and not just have a time deadline, an artificial deadline in place, so. Okay.
Thanks for the.
Yes, thank you.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay,
Sounds like there's more than I
first
know.
section item is labor negotiations. Under RCW 4230-144, it'll include all the 5 commissioners, our chief civil deputy, myself, Ashley Cameron, and Josh Grote.
How long?
5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay.
No action.
No action.
And then I've got a number of exec sessions that will be under pending potential litigations pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I. The first of those will be in regard to requirements of the county to provide translation services. Those present for that should be the board, Scott Simmons, myself, Ashley Cameron. The next would be.
How long?
Sorry, that one should take, let's say 15. And following that will be another pending potential litigation in regards to a sewer project. That should include, in addition to the board, Scott Simmons and myself, should include Kyle Tuig and Louis Grant, as well as Matt Koza from the prosecutor's office. And I believe that's also 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then finally, a pending potential litigation session in regards to sole source procurement. That would include the board, Scott Simmons, myself, as well as Tony Hall and Casey Evans from the prosecutor's office, Tony Hall from purchasing, and that should be 15 minutes as well.
Okay, so that's gonna take us beyond our noon.
Pick some up this afternoon.
So, yes, can we pick up the sewer project this afternoon?
I would defer to Kyle on that, if that.
That's fine. Okay. Yeah, I think if everyone's, that's a really important one to have everyone available, so, okay.
Okay, yes, because this one has to happen before.
Yep.
So
Move
that
that
has to happen before. So, okay.
You're seeing
Um,
a lot of
and then
executive
is it-
session items, so we'll do one till after during this. 1 or 2.
Got lunch.
Right.
I know, come on, let us go
That
here.
would be nice.
Otherwise, I won't even know what I'm voting for if I haven't had my lunch.
Yeah.
Randy, how are you?
Sure, we'd also like to have Randy Bischoff in the first round labor negotiations. I missed Randy.
You thought you were getting away.
I would say Randy could be in all of those.
Yep, Randy could be on board.
Because they all have some.
We don't get it out.
Okay, very good, thank you. We will be going into executive session. It's now 11:26. I know that Commissioner French and Commissioner Keeney both have a hard stop at noon, so we will be ending at noon and we'll be picking up the executive session on the sewer project after the 2 o'clock meeting today. So we will continue that because there's not enough time. So we will conclude the executive session at noon. No decisions anticipated to be made. And then we will continue the executive session this afternoon after